Welcome to All Things ADAS. My name's Jerry Miller, and I've got with me James Rodas today, and really his name is Spike, so if you get to know him, you never use James. So Rodas, Spike, you can call him almost anything, but Spike, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and in your life a little bit.
Thanks, Jerry. So I am in my 37th year in the industry. Started as a body tech and combo tech, and about 11 years ago switched over to being a production manager. And at that time, we kind of dug into ADAS. So we've kind of been doing it for 11 years now, so kind of ahead of that industry curve. And since then, it's been a whirlwind getting to know this side of the industry a lot better than I did.
So what made you get into it?
I worked for a very large dealer group, and at the time we were trying to do the shift that every shop kind of did in that time frame, right? We started pulling procedures and going down that rabbit hole a little bit more, and we saw that these weren't getting done, so we kind of went down to service and asked them about it, and they really hadn't done a lot of them at that point either, and I'm a bit of an information junkie, so kind of dug in and learned more about it. And now we know how much more important it is than we did 11 years ago, because we didn't have a lot of the same systems back then. So it's been a good, fun ride. And I will say in the last, 5-6 years, it sure changed a lot of the industry.
It's funny. So you come from the body shop side, and my background is from the parts and service side. I was in the industry for over 40 years, which makes me pretty old. And it seems like from the service side on these systems, there was only a couple guys in the shops that really ever got interest in it, and it took a while to find any expertise in it. And of course, it kind of ran into the body shop side, because a lot of what you ran into, you came to service and we came to you, but it was it kind of snuck up on us. I was doing a little research on what I found interesting. Do you have any idea when advanced driver assistance program systems started?
Would have been in the 70s, and it would be ABS is the first considered advanced driver assist system.
And I don't disagree with you, but what I found interesting, if you really think about it, cruise control, when that first started, was actually an advanced system at the time.
Yeah.
And I did a little checking on that. Do you know when that thing came into it was invented in 1948, believe it or not.
Really? And it didn't become mainstream for what, the 80s, maybe?
No, 1958 on a Chrysler Imperial.
Really?
Yeah, so if you think about it from the aspect of driver assistance systems, there's actually quite a few that we don't even think about. You think about, you got power steering. That's technically a system that you would call ADAS, and same thing with power brakes.
Yep.
And of course, we didn't think too much about that in the industry. Now, I wasn't in the industry at that time, but I would imagine that was kind of a tough thing for them to even get their arms wrapped around. And of course, it's grown to what we have today. And so it's been kind of interesting just to see the progression of it and where it's come from and where it's going to. But so when you talk about when did actually ADS start then in your mind?
Ford is the first one that really sparked it for me. Now, our shop did 95% Ford and Chryslers, maybe 1% GM, and we really didn't see anything else up there. In 14 is when I got used to it, and I want to say Ford had the bumper sensors probably around 2010. I know they were really prevalent starting about 2012, and that does have an azimuth and an elevation test to it, so technically a calibration or a check.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And on that note, how do you know if you've got a system that how do you know you even have a vehicle that has a calibration need or requirement on it, whether you need to have a body repair done or mechanical repair done? How would you even go about knowing that you have a system on your vehicle?
Well, there's a lot of scrubbing systems out there that'll check it for you, but the problem that we see is, at best, they're probably about 80% accurate, and they all kind of seem to pull the same information off the same estimates, but they're using some old data, maybe some poor VIN build data. Our system is, you send us the estimate, we have a human actually goes through and scrubs that estimate. We find that we're about 99% accurate, which we would love to be 100, but we understand human play comes into that sometimes. And although we don't like to miss any, we probably average around 99%. And our guys, they're not going to tell you how to fix a transmission or a motor, but when it comes to these things, this is all they do every day. They're very efficient and they're very good at it.
Well, and you're talking about it from the body shop side, and on the mechanical side too. You got a lot of vehicles that come into repair shops, and in my mind at least, I think body shops probably think about it more than the mechanical shop side, because in the body shop side, obviously the vehicle came there typically because it was involved in an accident of some sort. So now you're trying to get that vehicle back to what it should have been to begin with, and so you're digging into the repairs in a case where you're probably looking more for what's the procedures. Now, if you go into the mechanical shop, a lot of times they just fix something, whatever it may be. Let's just say they're putting on a side mirror, and they may not even think about it, because most technicians, hey, I can put the mirror on. I put the mirror on. Why would I have to look anything up to see what the procedure is? It's pretty simple to put a mirror on. Now all of a sudden you're in a vehicle that required a calibration on it, and it didn't even get done. Now, as a customer, how in the world do I even know that was a proper repair or not?
That's the scary thing, because there's not always a light that comes on. There's not always that beeping sound that says, hey, I'm off. It does happen. I can tell you that there's certain brands you could point one of these modules or radars to the sky and it'll calibrate. Doesn't mean it's right. You have to trust who's doing it. So consumers really got to do their homework. Not just consumers, but body shops. They got to do their homework on who's going to be doing a calibration. Is a dealership always the best option? Not always. For the reasons you just said. We cold call all the time in our markets, and we'll ask a dealership, hey, we had this done, what calibrations are needed? And most of the time they're inaccurate. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to get done right in the back, but the person you're talking to isn't a technician, so maybe they're not as up to things. Our hope is when it goes to the back to the actual technician, he's going to say, hey, there's more that needs to be done here. That's our hope. Is that really happening? I don't know. At that point, you got to rely on the documentation you get back. Should it just be a bill? No. In our world, we're going to give you 25, 30 photos. We're going to give you screen grabs from whatever manufacturer we're working with to show you that we are using the true OEM tool. We're going to show you our setup, that we're using the true OEM targets. And those are things that shops and consumers should want to see to know that, hey, this was done the right way. I'm good to go here.
Now, when you say a consumer, there's actually a number of different kinds of consumers. You've got the normal person that owns the car that drove down the road that really doesn't know anything about all this stuff. And for him to know if he's taking it to a body shop, in this case, or a mechanical shop that knows what they're doing, he has no way of knowing. It kind of reminds me sometimes, in my normal regular life, it's not like I'm running around and have the lawyers on retainer for myself. But when something happens, you always hear this term, you need to find yourself a good lawyer. Well, how do you know who a good lawyer is until after it's all over with? Mm-hmm. Then you decide whether or not you got a good one or not. So then it turns into word of mouth. Who do you talk to? But because if a car comes back from a shop and you think it's right and it may not be, you as the consumer, whether it's the body shop that did the repair, in your case, the body shop is a customer to you and a consumer, as well as an outside normal customer off the street. How do they know that it actually is right when the car doesn't necessarily tell you that it's wrong?
And that's the scary part. Sometimes when these things are wrong, it may take 20, 30 miles for it to kick on. We had a good one. There was a large national chain glass company that lady was up to Omaha from Kansas City. They replaced her glass. She's driving down the road, going back to Kansas City, puts on her adaptive cruise, has it set at like 75. Semi passes her. Car does a hard right. It thought the semi was in the same lane as her, so it corrected her driving for her, which was quite the shock to her. If there was somebody there, who knows, would it have still went if there was a car next to her? Luckily, there wasn't. Nobody was there. We brought it in. We calibrated it for Gave her about an hour's worth of driving after we were done, called and checked on her just to make sure that everything was good. Again, she had nothing telling her that it was wrong until it went to go perform, and it didn't perform. I
So
think
here's a case where this vehicle left a body shop that did the repairs.
glass company.
Yes, a glass company, I'm sorry,
Yep.
glass company that did the repairs. And the assumption is that they calibrated properly, but obviously they didn't. And so there's no check engine light, there's no light on the dash that tells you as the driver that there's a problem at all. Now, is there ever a case where there is an issue with the system that it does tell you as the driver?
Yeah, generally speaking, it has to be X degrees out of spec. And that number is different for every manufacturer. It might be 3.5 degrees, it might be 5 degrees, it could be 2. Sometimes they don't really give us that information, but at that point it's going to throw something. Also, think of ice, think of heavy rain, think of heavy snow. It's going to say, hey, this system's inoperable. It's not going to give you a list, but we know it's because it can't see far enough ahead. You got these windshield cameras that are reading 600 to 950 feet down the road. If it can only see 150, hopefully that light comes on and says, hey, don't trust me. I need to quit working.
Now, when you say that light is a light on the dash.
Yep, which, really only comes on for, you probably know this number better than me, but probably somewhere around 10% of the things wrong with a car. It's not always going to come on every time something's wrong.
Right.
But hopefully if it could be life-saving or motor-saving, hopefully it comes on at that point and says, hey, we got a problem. Let's get this fixed.
It's interesting, but it's also a little scary, not only for a customer, but for any particular shop, body shop or mechanical shop that's doing a repair, because if they don't get it right, we're talking about a huge liability.
There's already lawsuits out on this. Some have been settled out of court. I know Ford just settled 2 out of court maybe 2 weeks ago. Don't know what that result was. There was, one in, I believe it was California, where the car wasn't calibrated. She was used to reading her book, putting on her makeup every day, going to work, and she gets a car back from a body shop, and, well, guess what? It didn't work. Now that manufacturer knew who fixed the car because they knew who they sold the parts to, because parts are ordered by the VIN numbers now. So, there's always that trace back to the shop.
Right.
Or who did your calibrations or your repair work at that point.
So let's say that I got a few oars in the water, so I'm not completely naive. And so let's say that a vehicle comes back from a repair, and I happen to have a simple piece of test equipment that I can just plug into the OBD port and look at the car. Is it going to tell me that it is or isn't calibrated, or it was or wasn't, or if it's right or wrong?
No, even with factory equipment, it's not always going to tell you that. At the end, sometimes it just tells us successful. Then you have Subaru that gives you a percentage of how successful. I'm just throwing a number out. Say anything over 80% is considered good, right? A good calibration. Well, our goal is always, let's get it 98, 99, 100. Let's be better than good. Think back to the old alignment days. You used to have that little pie of green, and as long as you were in that, you were good.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays, we want it to be dead center, because now that's going to affect your calibration also.
Right.
So instead of just being okay, we want to be as perfect as we can so it doesn't affect the next thing, which doesn't affect the next thing.
So you bring up an alignment. So does that mean that if I have a vehicle that mechanically needs an alignment, that it potentially could need a calibration as well?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch on the market that, because you do an alignment, make a change, or you lift a vehicle, you put on the bigger tires, all that's going to affect calibrations. Some manufacturers are way more harsh, saying, hey, alignment done every time. But perfect world, every car gets an alignment check. Make sure that the car is reading where true north is, because that's the baseline for everything that we do. Now, sometimes you have certain bill payers that it doesn't need that alignment. Well, at that point, that shop has to make a choice. Am I going to follow 100% what the manufacturer says? Do I want to charge the customer? Am I going to eat it as a shop if they're not going to pay it? What's your level of liability exposure that you want? And what's your morality level? All right, we're going to have to cut that part. I don't know how to shut my notifications off.
I didn't get anything.
You couldn't hear that?
No.
Then I won't stop in the future then.
Okay.
It was really loud in my head, and I'm like, well, that's going to come across horrible.
No, I didn't get anything there. So that goes back to, a couple of questions that I had. I think we probably already hit it, but there again, just a normal person buying a used vehicle. I have my own thoughts on buying a used vehicle and how you decide whether or not you got a good one or not. But on this particular topic, there again, you don't know whether or not you're getting a vehicle that's calibrated properly or not, or if it's ever had an issue. Any particular thoughts on that?
It's getting scary. You have to trust who you're buying it from. A good deal sometimes is too good of a deal. In our shop, probably about a year ago, had a nice mom, had 2 kids with her, very small kids. She bought a car from one of these lots that's buying them from the salvage yards, and then they're rebuilding them and selling them. All she wanted was an emblem on the back of her Lincoln that said Lincoln because it was missing. And we uncovered things that just truly scared us as body shop people. And we had to inform her. We showed her, and there was a foot of foam that was holding the bumper up. And that's why you have to trust who you're buying a car from. My aunt, I found this car on Facebook Marketplace. Will you go look at it? No, I'm not going to go look at it. Go somewhere that actually does inspections, a true inspection, and that has a good reputation in whatever town you live in. I don't care if that car's $1,000 cheaper. You're probably going to run into issues at some point with that $1,000 car that would make you wish that you would have went to somebody more reputable.
So on that note, if I am looking at a used car, no matter where it's from, if I can't really get a code out of it, if I hook up a piece of test equipment, to the OBD port, and it doesn't trip any codes, it isn't giving me any indication, about the only choice I have in my mind is to drive the vehicle, see if it appears like it's driving correctly on for example, lane change. If I don't have my turn signal on and I'm driving and it sees a solid white line, does it try to correct it back? Does that seem accurate? All those types of things, from cruise control, adaptive cruise control. Hopefully it doesn't let me rear end somebody,
Yep.
Checking it that way. Either doing that or actually taking the car to a shop and having somebody say, or do you just bring it there and say, check all the calibrations? Now, I don't know how that would look. Have you ever had anybody come to you and say, check all the calibrations on this car?
Yeah, luckily we don't have very many comebacks, but you always do, and there's always a reason for that comeback. I'm going to call it 90% of the time there's a reason for that comeback. We had one that was 6 months ago. Car was fine for 6 months. Well, it's not working now, so we look into it. The radar is out of alignment. You can tell that something hit the grill at that point, which then impacted that radar and changed it a little. But as far as just simply plugging it in, saying, yeah, every calibration's great, there's really not that option on most manufacturers out there. The best way is go drive it, put it through the situations, and let's see what it does. Let's make sure that it reacts fine. If it's automatic emergency braking, we actually have a target that we drive cars at, and we'll check it to see how it works. But that's about the only ways that we know. If somebody questions it, we just start over in the process and pretend like it's the first time that we're doing it, and let's go through. And I will say, a handful of times we go through it, it's successful again, and never have an issue again. Mm-hmm. But we've never had one that we haven't got to completion to where a customer wasn't happy at the end.
So you talk about targets. You hear about people doing a calibration in the parking lot. And I look at things probably from the simplicity side of things, but it reminds me a little bit of, if I was going to try to do an alignment on a vehicle, mechanical alignment, you take it to a shop and, my background tells me that the alignment machine, first of all, when they install the alignment machine, everything has to be perfectly level to begin with. So the car is up on a level surface to start off with. I'm not aware of too many shops. I'm sure there's exceptions, but I'm not aware of too many shops that have a perfectly level floor. No different than I have never been in any of the shops. My background, we had 17 different dealerships. I'm not aware of one of those shops when we put an alignment machine in It didn't have to be, it couldn't just sit on the floor, for example, because there wasn't a floor that was ever level enough for the alignment machine. So I can't imagine any parking lot or any floor for that matter being level enough to get a completely accurate reading. Now, I'm not saying that it has to be perfect, but maybe it does. But I'm going to exaggerate for a minute. I'm going to assume that if I took a car and let's say that I had it on a real bad incline, and can I zero out my equipment so it thinks it's level? Then at that point, all my readings are going to be based off of it being at an angle. And then when it hits the real world of driving down the road where it is level, I'm going to assume that everything's going to be that far off. Am I right?
I agree with you that now there's some secondary companies out there that have made some ADAS machines that are supposed to take all that into account. You have the TruePoint, you have Altel, you have Hunter has their new Max ADAS. That's a pretty cool system. We've beta tested a lot of these, and to me that's probably the most advanced one right now. It does still only have, I think it's 2 OEM saying that, yeah, you can use this for our calibrations as long as you still use our factory scan tool. But yeah, I mean, there was just and it cracks me up because these huge national companies, that same glass company I was talking about a little bit ago, there was just a photo that they posted on social media that showed them doing a calibration in a parking lot. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. You guys are supposed to be experts here. So now what goes down the rabbit hole is you get uneducated bill payers on the other side. It's not like when I first came in where the adjusters on the other side, they were old body guys, they were old painters, so they kind of understood what we go through on a daily basis. Well, now you got somebody that might have been selling pizzas a month ago trying to tell you how to fix a car and what they're going to pay for and what they're not going to pay for, and they see these social media posts and they say, well, what do you mean I had to go back to the calibration place? You just do it in the parking lot. I see these other companies do it in the parking lot. Why can't you do it? Well, we have standards. We want to do it right. And you're completely right on the shop floors. Dealerships weren't made to have blank space, right? They were meant to produce. So generally speaking, the only spot you have is in the middle of that aisleway, which is usually where the drain is, which is usually where the floor slope. We do some calibrations mobily, but we check the floor, we check the lighting, we check the space. Hey, maybe we can do 3 or 4 calibrations here, but the rest are going to have to go back to our home base to make sure that, we have the room and the space and everything adequate. Some shop owners don't want to hear that. They want it done in their shop. Well, I'm sorry, we can do these here, and we're not going to change our standards. And usually the shops that we want to do business with are, at the end, they understand why we're doing that. We're covering your liability and ours. This is the only way we can do this.
Now, you talk about that parking lot or the shop floor, because neither one is going to be a level surface in most cases. So, but it's more than just that too, isn't it? I mean, if you're doing it outside, aren't there issues with light?
Yep.
And how does that affect it?
Yeah, you get hot spots, and you can get it inside with great lighting. One manufacturer is very picky on lighting. The systems are very picky on lighting. So we've had to put, screen material over lights to kind of diffuse the lights to get rid of hot spots.
But when you mean hot spots, explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, let's think of a super shiny floor, and you can see the light going down, and you have that orb where the light hits the ground.
Right.
Same thing kind of happens when you're doing, let's just call it a windshield camera. If that orb is hitting that spot, it's going to be an issue because now it's getting too much light in that one single spot. So if we can put lights on dimmers or diffusers over lights, that usually fixes the problem. Another thing that's a real issue is garage doors or, big picture windows. Now you got light shining through those. We have one facility where that only happens in the winter, so we had to put some shades up, and we closed the shades in the winter. But other than that, inside you run into very few problems. Outside, there's just so many problems. You can't control anything outside. And really, this is a very skilled profession.
Well, does
and
that,
needs to be treated as such.
if you do experience, as you call a hot spot, and when you're trying to calibrate, does that not allow you to get the calibration done correctly? Does it tell you that it's wrong? Or does it still allow you to calibrate it, even though there's a hot spot?
To my experience, if there's a hot spot, it's not going to go through, but it doesn't tell you why it won't go through.
So you got to figure out why it's not working.
Yep. So now you're going back and you're checking, everything 2-3 more times, and you start scratching your head, and you're like, I wonder if it's the lighting. Check the lighting.
So if the lighting is that important, now let's say you got the car calibrated now, but now you're driving that car in real life out in the world, and the light is constantly changing from sunlight to every. Doesn't that affect it then too?
Not that we've ran into. Again, in my opinion, when the sun is going, it diffuses, right? You don't get the hot spots like you see from a light inside, bouncing off of the floor.
Right.
But again, that probably getting too far into science for me to be any helpful, because that was my worst subject in school.
Well, as I'm thinking about that, it reminds me sometimes, I don't see it too much anymore, but a number of years ago, since I'm old, everybody seemed to have this craze of putting that great big drop bumper on the back of a pickup that was chrome. And you drive behind one of those things on a sunny day, and if it was in the right angle, you couldn't see nothing. I mean, it was talk about a blind spot. I would imagine that would mess up systems pretty bad when you just think about that for a second. But, I really don't run into that anymore.
Yeah, I would have to think, given the right angles and everything, if it was coming right back at that, yeah, I would assume it would at least give it a brief moment to where it's like, okay, what's going on here?
Right. So, switching gears a little bit here, explain a little bit about OEM Calibration. That's the business that you're in. That's the name of your company. And how long has that company been in existence? And I think we can understand why it's there, simply because of the need. But how does it work a little bit? What do you guys do? How do you communicate with customers? In my case, as I'm saying customers, I'm thinking mainly outside body shops that are coming to you, or mechanical shops for that matter, needing calibrations. And now they need the expert. They need the brain surgeon now rather than the general practitioner.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I believe we started officially 4 years ago this month. So happy birthday to us. And we were born out of a need, right? We're watching them get done in our body shops, and I backed away from being a manager, and I was helping all of our body shops at that point. So kind of went around and saw how we were doing it at other locations, and we were using an outside company that was doing it in parking lots and shop space that shouldn't be done. And so went to leadership and owners, and I said, hey, I think we got a problem. And at that time, I was actually invited down to see Nissan's ADAS class that was just coming out. So I got to go as a guest and came back, and I said, yeah, I definitely know we have a problem now. Went around, looked at our shops, and kind of brought this idea up. And at first, my owner was no different than everybody else. He said, there's this other system over here for, $30,000 that we can buy that can do it. And I'm like, it can do it, but it's not right. How can we tell people to buy factory parts and, let's do everything right, and then we're going to choose this because it's the cheap way out? Our way isn't cheap. I mean, our way is very expensive to do it, but it's the only way we believe in. One, to cover liability. Two, to make sure customers don't get hurt. I mean, we genuinely care about that, and our reputation means more than a couple dollars here or there on every job. So when insurance companies say, well, this company will do it for this price, you need to match that. Well, we're not both apples, right? One of us is an apple and one of us is a pear. Customers to us, the way that our system works is you're going to send us an estimate. We're going to scrub that using the workshop manual. We're not going to use aftermarket anything. We're going to go line by line. If you replace the bumper, we're going to go into the bumper and say, okay, bumper was off. What do we have to do? We call it going down the rabbit hole. You just start going down and peeling off pieces of paper till you get to the bottom, till you get to the one that says, okay, here's the calibration. Yes, it needs done. And sometimes we have to take judgment call. I think we're up to 20, parent company's up to 24 dealerships, I believe. So we're pretty lucky. We get to talk to lots of engineers. I got engineers that, I send Christmas cards to. If we don't understand the procedure.
Those, did they ever send you a Christmas card?
A couple of them for sure.
Okay, all right.
But, sometimes insurance comes back and says, hey, this doesn't meet the requirement. We're lucky enough to go to the engineers and say, hey, here's what was done. Here's what we believe. Insurance is denying it. What are your thoughts? And we've had to change our stance a couple times. It doesn't really meet that criteria. Okay, give me the criteria. So now going forward, we don't have to bug you and we can adapt and we can do what's right. Because all we want to do is 100% what's needed. Nothing more, nothing less.
So you've got quite an advantage in my mind over a lot of different competitors, let's put it, when it comes to calibrations, since you've got that connection with engineers from the actual manufacturers versus, a lot of shops are, they're talking to a third party vendor, call them an expert, but that expert still isn't an expert because he's not really from the manufacturer to begin with. Now, he might be an expert on his piece of equipment, and they're only going to have what they have for information based off of what's been given to them. Whereas the manufacturer's engineers, they are the ones that are designing and working with these systems. So I would think that you've got an advantage there.
Yeah, and those have really been relationships fostered over my whole time here. When did go into management 10 years ago, it's like, started learning how to pull procedures and things like that, which we really weren't doing. I don't think a lot of people were not. Should we have been? Probably. But, we drew that line in the sand and it's like, okay, we're going to start pulling procedures. So when you don't understand one, who do you go to? So I just kept going up the chain until I got to the right people. And at that point, it's relationships. You find that, hey, they help us. And we actually help them quite a bit too. There's a ton of manufacturers that have called me and they're like, hey, can you write an estimate on this? We're trying to figure out warranty times. I don't know if it's so much warranty times, but labor ops and things like that. So I'll write an estimate, send it back to them so they can kind of do some stuff on their side to get to those amounts. So it's a good give and take. And I think both sides are pretty appreciative of what we give to the other side.
Well, I know this from experience and from working with you in the past in the body shops that, there was a lot of speculation, even when you started in your own body shops at first, on getting that estimate from the different body shops. Not only were you helping them with the calibration in the process of what needs to be done, and not only that, but to have it done properly, but you also made a big difference on showing those body shops the kind of a side benefit to not just the calibrations, but the procedures on what needs to be done to do a particular repair. And I know there was a little pushback to begin with, as well as with other outside body shops to begin with. But once they started to trust the system and realize that they were making more money because they weren't actually asking for all the things that they should be able to ask for from the insurance company to get reimbursed for. They were leaving a lot of money on the table, or a lot of time or materials on the table, just simply because they didn't know that they could ask for it.
A lot of them hadn't seen procedures really.
Yeah.
Like you said, we do sell a ton of parts through our dealer group, and shops name kind of got out there. Hey, if you need procedures, they'll help you with this. And yeah, sometimes they'll read them and they'll call back and they'll be like, I had no clue I should be doing half of these things. And
right.
It's pretty nice, yes, if you do use us as a customer and you're going to weld on a quarter panel, yeah, when you send your quote in, just ask us, hey, can you pull the quarter panel procedures, and we'll send them right back to you. No big deal. Again, we're already in the estimate, so it takes us another few minutes to pull it. Now it's going to take you some time to read it and go through it, but we can get it pulled for you pretty quick.
Now, as you say that, if I'm an outside customer to you, I'm a body shop, how does that work? I send it over to you on a piece of paper, this estimate. I send it to you in an email. How does that work?
So we do have our own dashboard, our own management system even. You simply drag it and drop it into there. The minute you do that...
This is an actual separate program in the computer.
Yep. Made by us. I think think we might have a guy on maybe next week that'll run us through that and show us kind of how that whole hot dog is made.
Okay.
But at that point, our guys are going to go through and scrub it.
So it's not a phone. I don't have to make a phone call to anybody.
Nope, you don't have to talk to anybody. Nobody wants to talk on the phone anymore.
Yeah.
Within 15 to 30 minutes, generally speaking, you're going to get a quote back. And that quote is all the PDF copies of why it needs done. You took off the bumper. If you took off the bumper, it says you have to do this. So we're going to give why and how every time. And then you're going to go through and schedule it when you get it back. Now, we understand that is a moving target, right? You don't know that answer when the car comes in because of parts delays or insurance company delays, or Bob was sick, last week, so that's going to slow down production. But we still want you to put a date in. We want it put on our radar. Now, as that date gets closer, so say it's going to be done on the 10th, and at the 8th, you're like, man, we're still waiting another week for a back order part. I don't think this car's going to be ready to the 17th. Now you can go back and update that and put it to the 17th or a closer date.
And when you say schedule it, you mean schedule for the actual calibration that your company needs to do, whether it's coming to your shop or whether or not you're going to their shop.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then after that, it's simply when it's ready to calibrate, you go back in, you hit the button that says ready to calibrate. You don't need to call us. That means somebody will be calling you shortly and they're going to give you an ETA. And generally speaking, it is same day service. Now, if you call us if you're ready one at 1 o'clock on a Friday, may not happen. Body shops are still really bad about getting everything in on Monday and trying to kick it out the door on Friday.
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't bring them in all week and just kind of have a nice steady stream.
Right.
But it just doesn't work that way, it seems like.
Old thinking.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah.
But, it is still, Thursdays and Fridays are still our busiest days of the week. We do see some shops that are migrating to that better thought process of bringing in 2 on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday. And those shops are, it's noticeable.
It reminds me of, from the mechanical side, for years, and it still is this way, unfortunately. It takes forever for people to change what they're doing once they're stuck in their ways. But, you go to a dealership, and it's always, what time should I bring it in? And the answer is always first thing in the morning, which is bring it in at 8. When will it be done? 5. Well, all it came in for was an oil change. It takes 8 hours to do an oil change. It doesn't make any difference what the repair is. It takes all day, and that's the reputation that a dealership has. It takes all day to do the job when it doesn't have to be that way. And what's really funny or scary or sad in reality is if you actually get a car in at 10 o'clock and you say it'll be done in a half an hour and it actually happens, the customer absolutely can't believe that that's what happened because they're so programmed that they can't live by anything that we ever tell them. So we have a lot of work to do in our business, but I don't know if I have anything else I want to ask you at this point. I think we've covered most of the things that I wanted to hit, unless there's something that you wanted to ask or bring up or mention.
No, I think next week we might bring in Andy Hipwell, who is our day-to-day manager at OEM. He's kind of the secret sauce behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe we can have him show that our management system a little bit, maybe go through that a little bit so customers understand, kind of how that system works a little better.
Okay. And as far as trying to get a hold of you or I, if anybody has a question or anything that they want to add to future conversations, we'll leave our email contact information at the end of this. Other than that, I think we're going to say goodbye.
Peace out, everybody. Thanks for having me, Jerry.
You bet. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you.